introducing the members on the panel. And we have with us this evening MP Ralph Thorne, who is the chair of the Thorne Commission. We have Deputy Chair Ambassador David Comishon, and we have Commission member Mr. Adrian Donovan. I am your chair, Crystal Howell. I'm also a member of the Thorne Commission. We will begin the meeting by giving you a brief understanding of the purpose of this meeting today, because we want you to get an understanding of what the Thorne Commission is here to do and what we are all about. We are proposing people's assemblies, and we are hoping that they will improve accountability in governance, engage people participation, establish high standards in public service, contribute creativity, intelligence, and energy to public affairs administration, deliver critical services to the communities, protect neighborhood welfare, and help to participate in collective decision-making and administrative activities that are designed to foster social and national unity. The assemblies will be community-based, democratic, participatory governance structures based on volunteer, non-partisan service, independent of government ministers. The proposed structure is to have one assembly in the parishes of St. Lucie, St. Andrew, St. Joseph, St. John, and St. Thomas, 2 in St. George, St. Peter, St. Philip, and St. James, 3 in Christchurch, and 4 in St. Michael. That would give us a total of 20 people's assemblies, and members can consist of an equal number of elected ex officio members, parish residents, and youth from secondary and tertiary educational institutions. Elections can be organized by the Electoral and Boundaries Commission, who will publish the candidates' community profiles. These community profiles will be very important because it will form the basis for which residents of the community will be able to make decisions as to who they would want to vote for. And we emphasize there will be no government ministers or members of the commission or anyone else who will be selecting persons to sit on these assemblies. These assemblies will be represented by the persons that you in the community feel comfortable that they have a great track record to be able to help to have the community's concerns heard and to have your best interests at heart. The senior student body of each secondary school should elect 1 male and 1 female student to serve. The UE student body should elect 10, and BCC and SJPP should elect 5 representatives. This would give us a total of approximately 620 members. Parliament can include a financial allocation in government's annual estimates and budget to be divided equally amongst the People's Assembly. The financial allocations can then be audited by the Auditor General. The proposed functions for these assemblies would include 1, oversight of government agencies, which includes having a committee that will review the performance of critical services to improve efficiencies and accountability. For example, the QEH, the NHC, and Barbados Water Authority. The chairperson's caucus can select persons from the 620 members to carry out inspections, receive public complaints, and meet with management to discuss issues and suggest remedies. The second area would be related to community well-being teams. These will be to build a community oversight and assistance program to protect children, elders, disabled persons, and needy residents in conjunction with the Department of Emergency Management. We're also looking to establish a sanitation and road repairs committee to respond to emergency cases of garbage pileups, excessive overgrown bush or potholes, as well as general environmental protection and anti-littering campaigns. 4, The Ministry of Education can consult with each assembly on school board appointments or to select an assembly member for said board. The assembly members can also form a youth education and social development think tank to construct improvements. 5, a management and program development committee comprised of assembly members, the National Sports Council, the Community Development Department, and the National Cultural Foundation can oversee community development, sports, and cultural programs for the community centers of the assembly areas with the Community Development Department budget. 6, each assembly can receive applications for wayside vending licenses, identify public locations for vendors, determine whether to issue licenses, inspect wayside vending locations, and ensure that proper environmental and other standards are maintained. 7, a quarterly community forum consisting of community and assembly members, as well as members of parliament, can discuss national affairs and pending bills. 8, the Town and Country Planning Department can consult with the relevant assembly before approving applications for major construction or other physical development projects, particularly for areas of key interest such as beaches and historical sites. 9, government ministers and agencies can consult with the assemblies in developing plans and strategies for areas such as roads, road repairs, public housing, health clinics, jobs for the unemployed, and sporting or recreational facilities. 10, government can provide each assembly with technical advice, material, assistance, and land and property for a community-based cooperative business project. Coming out of some of our meetings, we've also had suggestions to include commerce, innovation, and cultural retention. I'd like to highlight at this point that everything that you have heard so far is a proposal and nothing is set in stone. This is the purpose for these town halls. We have come up with an initial proposal, but we want to hear from every community to be able to identify if you think that the proposal we have will work, if you think there's something that needs to be changed, added, or subtracted, so that we can offer you the best solution for how these people's assemblies will work. We want to make sure that people's voices are heard, but we want to do it in a way that will be effective and efficient given the constraints that we currently have. At this time, before I go into any of the questions I'd like you to think about, I will now turn over to our chair or deputy chair or members of the Thorne Commission so that they can add their contribution to the town hall discussion for this evening.
Thank you, moderator, and good evening to all.
Ralph Thorne. What's your bit?
I can go. All right. Thanks, moderator, and good evening to all. A special good evening to the residents of St. John. And in speaking of St. John, I remind myself that when we began this exercise, we told the public that we were proposing to base the assemblies on parishes as opposed to constituencies. And that has a particular meaning in relation to St. John because St. John has a very strong identity as a parish in itself. It's a self-contained parish, and there's definitely a St. John identity. So that I don't think that we are going to have any difficulty establishing a People's Assembly in St. John. And I'd also want to say that St. John has a strong, very strong history of community governance. We've had in the past the St. John Folk Group, Mr. Pearson Bellamy and Trevor Marshall. We've had the Wilson Hill Folk Group as well. We've had the St. John, the Cricket Club, the St. John Cultural Club. There's also a very strong tradition of BCL cricket, and I think that BCL cricket used to be played around the Messiah Street area. So that St. John has a very, very strong and long tradition in terms of community governance so that we come to a community that I think using that experience will be ready and able to institute a people's assembly. I'd also want to add to that the presence of Lodge School in St. John. Lodge School has had a long relationship with the residents of St. John, so that I know that people from St. John who did not even go to the Lodge School supported the Lodge School in terms football and cricket. They were very strong in supporting the school in athletics. Of course, the people who lived in St. John, the boys at that time who lived in St. John and went to Lodge School, I mean, theirs was a particularly strong St. John/Lodge identity. So I've said all of that to say that St. John, as a self-contained parish, a self-contained community, has had a distinct identity based on a history of community governance and community organization. So I feel particularly pleased to be bringing this town hall meeting to St. John this evening. Of course, it goes beyond the boundaries of St. John because we're going online so that it is open to all persons in Barbados and in the diaspora. I hope that the parliamentary representative has joined us by now on Zoom. That's Mr. Charles Griffith. Again, Charles has a very strong association with the parish, being from the parish, and he has a very strong history of involvement in the community and cultural and social life of St. John. So I want to give a very special welcome to Member of Parliament Charles Griffith this evening. I feel absolutely confident, and this is not being partisan here, I feel absolutely confident that St. John is well equipped in terms of its human capital to help the rest of Barbados to implement a system of local governance and local government in that parish. So that's all I'd want to say at this stage, and hopefully we'll have a very, very productive discussion. David?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, Ralph. Brothers and sisters, I'd just like to make just a brief opening contribution and to focus on the spirit of these people's assemblies as we see it. You know, it's the structure. We are thinking of a very basic structure. That's where the people in the communities elect their own assembly men and women in community-based elections that will be held under the auspices of the Electoral and Boundaries Commission to make sure that everything is transparent, fair, and totally above board and very, very professionally done. But you would be envisaging a People's Assembly of perhaps around 30 members, you know, elected by the residents themselves. The residents know who their leaders are, who the people they really trust. And then that People's Assembly would also have the power to co-opt persons to come and help and serve on subcommittees and so forth. And we are thinking co-opt not only residents of the area, but also co-opt public officers who could be used as advisors and consultants to the assembly. Also co-opt spiritual and religious leaders drawn from all of the churches and the religions and denominations of Barbados. So we are looking at something very inclusive. The whole idea is all hands on deck. We know that we have some serious problems in Barbados, and we know for us to deal with those problems, we need an all-of-society approach. So it is really about rebuilding that spirit of community, rebuilding that spirit of people participation in protecting their neighborhoods, looking out for their neighbors, being involved in delivering services to their own community. And that People's Assembly will have a relationship with the public sector of Barbados, because there'll be focal points in all government ministries to relate to the People's Assembly, to facilitate the work of the People's Assembly. And we've come up with some functions that we think would be very powerful and useful functions for the People's Assembly to engage in. But we are open to ideas. The Thorne Commission is really about drawing ideas from the public. The mission that we were given by the government of Barbados was to take this initial concept paper that was developed and take this to the people of Barbados to use as an instrument for having a conversation, but very much to collect the ideas of the people, to get your response to the ideas in the concept paper, and at the end of all of these town hall meetings, to flesh out a new concept paper, taking all of the insights and suggestions into consideration, so that we could then present the cabinet of Barbados with a final document that cabinet will then look at, will decide if they accept it in total, if they need to modify it. And we intend to get our final concept paper to the cabinet of Barbados on or before the 30th of November. We want it to be an independence gift to the people of Barbados. Once we get it to cabinet will then do their thing. Eventually, it will go to Parliament because it has to be enacted into law. We are not talking about just we're not just talking about some unofficial, casual thing. No. We're talking about a structure that will be rooted in law and enacted in an act of Parliament. And it is our hope and expectation that that will be done during the course of 2021, and that we will commence the system of People's Assemblies in 2021. So the point I was making about the functions, we have outlined 10 functions, but we are open. We are open to ideas, for novel ideas for other functions, or how we could further flesh out these functions and give them even more clout and more meaning. So it's in that spirit that we are having this town hall meeting, and we want you to participate in a very enthusiastic and hands-on participatory manner. That's my opening intervention. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Last week we were in St. Thomas. We had a very good program, and today we are in the lovely parish of St. John, and we are really looking forward to having a very interactive session. Each parish is going to have their own particular issues and challenges, and St. John will have theirs. So we are here this afternoon to hear from you, everyone, to hear your concerns and your suggestions. As both members who said before me, it's nothing written in stone, and we need especially to hear from some young people. We know we have the issues regarding right now. We had a lot of rain. The roads are in bad condition. In St. John, you need more recreation facilities, the issues of debushing, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to welcome each and every one of you this afternoon, and we're looking forward to a very interactive session. Yes, Crystal?
Thank you for that contribution. I know we do have some St. John residents that have expressed an interest in sharing their contributions. So just before we allow them to have their voices heard, I just want to share some of the questions that we've been asking persons so that you can give some time and some thought to thinking about your responses to these questions while the first contribution is shared. So, do you support a system of local governance in Barbados? And that's always going to be the first question, because we can't assume that everyone wants to have local governance or feels confident that their voices will be adequately represented by those that they elect. But if you do have concerns about local governance, we'd like you to share those concerns so that we can hopefully address them. Do you support the proposal that each assembly should be non-partisan? There are some persons who want to have political involvement and they would give their reasons, and we need to hear why you would want it that way or why you think it should stay non-partisan. so that we can include those comments in our proposals and see where persons are leaning? Do you support the proposal for each assembly to comprise 30 persons? Some communities have wanted more, some have wanted less. Some think that the number of assemblies in their particular parish is too little or too much. So we want to hear your concerns and what you think would be an ideal number. What do you think should be the minimum or maximum age for membership on people's assemblies? Some persons have expressed that they think there shouldn't be an age limit. It should be based on what the individual can contribute. So if there is a 13-year-old who has a strong voice and has the wherewithal to be able to represent their community adequately and to go above and beyond, there should be no limit to that person because they are of a certain age. Do you support the proposal that each assembly should comprise a mix of elected private persons who live in a geographical area, together with persons nominated from specific departments within the public service? Do you think that the nominated public servant should sit in the assembly in his or her capacity as a public servant or as a citizen of that particular community or parish? Noting that each assembly may cover more than one constituency, what do you think should be the relationship, if any at all, between the People's Assembly and the parliamentary representative? Should sessions of the Assembly be generally conducted in public? And when would you wish to see a system of local governance implemented in Barbados? The current proposal is for it to be in 2021. So we're hoping to hear from you as to how soon you would love to hear about local governance coming to a community near you. And to that end, I'll give you some time to think about those questions. And in the interim, I know we have AEMPV5 who would have expressed an interest in making a contribution. I can see his video up. You can unmute yourself and make your contribution.
Hello, good evening to everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Mitchinson Small. I'm a resident of St. John, number 2 Gorham, St. John to be specific. But the questions that you read just now were so many. I was unable to make note of some of them, but there's what I agree, yes, that there should be local governance. I also agree that the assembly should be non-partisan without any political interference, right? I would also want to suggest that members serving on the assemblies should be persons from within the community themselves or the parishes themselves, and they should be nominated. But before they're able now to serve on these committees, they should be asked to say why they want to serve, rather than just want to get on the committee, take up space, and at the end of the day, not sure what they want to do. They should be asked to say why they want to serve. My contribution mostly though is about law and order. And it speaks to the taking of statements in police stations. And I'll give a brief preamble to my suggestion. As you are aware, this current administration has recently appointed some 300 justices of the peace or thereabout. And before these were appointed, there are many more across the length and breadth of this country. And among them are active and retired civil servants, as well as persons who previously worked and some who are still working in the private sector. One cannot deny that there are many among them who have an acceptable good command of the English language and the skill and capacity for taking dictation. Now, I want to suggest that some of these third persons can be utilized in the police stations for taking statements from persons who come with a complaint. And this would help to free up officers to do a lot more community policing and investigations instead of sitting behind a computer to take a statement from a person who has a complaint, right? I also wish to further suggest that that the powers that be put in place a series of training sessions on how to effectively take statements in relation to the law. The suggestion of confidentiality should be part and parcel of these training sessions. So I want to suggest that in and among these training sessions that they must stress that the information that they take from persons with the complaints should be held in the highest confidence, right? And again, I would suggest that this like the committee is asking for it to be a voluntary service. So that's my contribution for today. I listen to your response.
We definitely appreciate the contribution that you made. Before I do respond, I'd like to take this time to welcome MP Charles Griffith. I am been told that he is in the Zoom meeting, yes, and I would like to give him a moment to share his thoughts, including what he thinks about the contribution that was just made by the St. John resident. And welcome.
Thank you, Crystal. Blessings on us all. I want to share and agree with some of the sentiments, or the majority of the sentiments expressed by Julian. I do agree that this is a proactive step, a step in the right direction, because the truth is that being an MP, you can only be in so many places at a particular time. And I think that the People's Assembly would provide an opportunity to have additional help on the ground within constituencies. To answer one of your questions, yes, I believe that there should be a link between the assemblies and the MP, because there's certain things that the MP may be able to trigger that is outside of the remit of the People's Assembly. The number 30 is a nice round number, but I'm just wondering as well, in terms of if there is a voting process, I'm thinking that maybe it should be an odd number, but that is just my take on it. I would like to see a situation where, to carry it a little further in terms of what Julian would have mentioned, yes, we have the JPs, but in terms of training for these individuals, and I know that that must be a part of the process, but what I'm interested in finding out as well is what is in place for persons who are not functioning on the committee. Because you may have a situation where someone is able to mobilize a whole lot of people to vote on a particular evening when the elections are being held, but then the contribution to the People's Assembly is almost non-existent. And I think that if we're going to make this work, we need people who are going to come to the Assembly and actually hit the ground running, be able to interact and contribute in a significant way to the development of our communities. I'm concerned that, for example, and it was mentioned by one of the panelists that Ralph would have mentioned that culture was something that was alive and well in St. John for a number of years. So I'm hoping that the interaction with the MP for every constituency will bring about this. So the MP will be able to identify some of the areas at community level that are desperately lacking. Now, he can do so much, but I believe that if the input from the MP to the People's Assembly, yes, I agree to that it should be non-partisan, but in order to have certain things done, I think that there should be a link between the People's Assembly and the MP going forward to ensure that you have, that fusion of ideas, fusion of mind in terms of the end result, having the bigger picture in place. I will come back, but those are my opening remarks in relation to this. I fully support it, and I think it is a wonderful thing that we should have up and going.
Thanks very much, Charles, and I want to say personally to you, thanks for coming on at such late notice. I just spoke to you this afternoon, and here you are. So I apologize to you for the late notice, and I'm really, really happy to see you responding so quickly.
Not a problem. My belief, St. John.
Good, and I hope that you stay with us for the next hour and a half or 2 hours.
I will.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. To Mr. Small, the concerns that he addressed really are within the ambit of the Evidence Act of Barbados, and that is beyond the purview of what we're doing here. The question of people giving statements in police stations, that is a fundamental issue involving people's constitutional rights. And I don't think that is an area with which we will concern ourselves. That is an area for the courts, that's an area for the justice system, that's an area for the criminal justice system, and that is an area for the Evidence Act. But we accept the suggestion that there needs to be participation by the members of the community in the affairs of the state. And we contemplate that the People's Assemblies will be doing two things broadly, involving themselves in the infrastructure within the community, infrastructural development, that is to say roads, streetlights, garbage collection, etc. And then the development of the human capital, the community well-being teams that David talks about so often. Those are the areas of our concern. Those are the areas that we anticipate that the People's Assemblies will be dealing with. But as I said, we accept the suggestion as to improving the justice system. But I would want Mr. Tull, that's the name, Mr. Tull, what's his name? Small. I would want Julian Small to address that concern, perhaps to his parliamentary representative, so that may become an issue in terms of amending the Evidence Act. Because when a chap goes into a police station, he doesn't want any and everybody come in to say that he said this or he said that, and that is a police concern. Yeah. So that is my response on that issue. As to Charles's input, Charles, we've been trying for a while to answer the question as to the relationship between the Member of Parliament and the People's Assembly. We are aware that a People's Assembly that says that it is non-partisan may feel some comfort or discomfort with a Member of Parliament who obviously belongs to one party or another. But you've advanced some interesting arguments for the involvement of the Member of Parliament. I understand you to be saying that it would be informal. What we are trying to gain from the public is whether that relationship should be formal, in other words, whether his role is written in to the act of what will become an act of Parliament, hopefully, or whether as a good Member of Parliament he will just attach himself to that assembly and offer his expertise and offer the weight of his office. But I'm glad you referred to the relationship between the Member of Parliament and the People's Assembly. That is something we want to hear all of you on. That is something we want to hear all of the members of Parliament on. And Charles, I want to thank you for addressing that issue.
If I could just address that same issue that Charles Griffith raised, because it keeps coming up again and again, you know? And my own feeling is, I think there's a strong sentiment that the People's Assemblies should be non-partisan, that there should be some separation between the People's Assemblies and government ministers and members of Parliament. However, clearly, members of Parliament with responsibility for a particular community and the People's Assembly have similar interests in the well-being of the community. But I am thinking that it is going to work itself out in a very practical way, because there are some functions that the People's Assembly will be carrying out that naturally connect with the work and the mandate of the Member of Parliament. For example, you're going to have these community well-being teams whose job it will be to ensure that nobody falls through the cracks, that will visit homes, visit communities, ensure that people in need are taken care of. Clearly, the Member of Parliament is going to be referring cases to the community well-being team, and vice versa. The community well-being team might need to call on the Member of Parliament to facilitate assistance for a particular member of the community in need of assistance. Then we speak about the community forum, where Quarterly, we're going to come together to discuss important national affairs, including legislation that might be pending before Parliament and so forth. So clearly, the People's Assembly and the MP will connect in terms of that function. We also spoke about the assemblies being in a position to advise government agencies about the needs of the community, whether it be for daycare centers, jobs for the residents, housing, and clearly again, that's a function where you can see the People's Assembly and the Member of Parliament actually collaborating in clarifying what kinds of demands that the Assembly area may wish to, or requests, requests may wish to make of central government. So I think as we go through it, the Environment Subcommittee, and Crystal, we are saying environment rather than sanitation because we are making it broader. The Environment Subcommittee that is going to look at the environmental issues in the area. Clearly, once again, the Member of Parliament will refer particular cases to that Environment Subcommittee and vice versa. So I think the way to look at it is to say, yes, we're going to have that formal separation, but in terms of the specific functions that the People's Assembly will be carrying out, there will be several of those functions where a connection with the Member of Parliament will be necessary and will be useful on both sides. And so that's how I am thinking about it.
And the Member of Parliament, Mr. Griffith of St. John, is in a very advantageous position because he's a former youth commissioner himself. So he knows quite well the challenges and issues that are occurring on a daily basis throughout the length from Breakfast St. John. Like last week, we had a Member of Parliament from St. Thomas, the Honourable Cynthia Ford, another community practitioner. So these particular two members of Parliament are sitting in an ideal position right now that they could garner information and to easily gather residents of St. John. They sit on this People's Committee. The area that Julia mentioned about the number 30, the 30 is not written in stone. Wherever we go at every meeting, we have various ideas being knocked about. Some are saying 10, some are saying 15, 20. It is not written in stone. By the end of the day, by Independence Day, when we hope to have this document finalized, we will come up with the ideal number, and maybe it could be an odd number as you had rightly recommended. Yes, sure.
You can unmute yourself.
Ready for me? Unmute.
You can go ahead, sir.
Okay.
I assume you want to respond.
Yes, please. I wanted to. With respect to the suggestion, the motions that that parliamentary representatives should not be involved. You know, having heard Mr. Thorne and Mr. Griffith, you know, it then came to mind that I think it would be almost impossible, or it would be challenging to completely eliminate parliamentary representatives. And I say that in view that, take for example, capital works projects, which is going to be required government funding. The MP now, who would serve as the go-between, and should be able to be in a position where he or she can speak to transparency and accountability when it comes to government funding. So I think to some degree the parliamentary representative should be involved, but when it comes to selecting persons to serve on the Assembly Committee, I don't think that the MP should be part of that process.
Okay. We definitely want to thank you for the contribution that you have made, and we're trying to include your thoughts. There are some very common threads between what you would have said and some of the other contributions we've heard from persons across Barbados. So we thank you for your input. You're
welcome.
We'll next be going to Michelle Springer, who has had her hand raised to make a contribution. So you can go ahead, Ms. Springer, and unmute yourself so that you can make your contribution.
Good afternoon. I wanted to know if there is a goal date, like you have, or I imagine you already set out some laws, some guidelines, and that kind of thing that you want to follow. So I would want to know if there is a date that you all would have set to say maybe you're looking to start this maybe around April of next year or so. That's one. Two, in terms of the committee, the council being non-partisan, I think that that is a good idea in theory. However, in practice, I would imagine that if St. Andrew, for instance, needed, sorry, St. John people, but yes, I'm from St. Andrews. Say, for instance, St. Andrew needed road works, and the council met and they put forward their concerns that needed to be addressed, and maybe St. John, that minister is their representative and also the representative who holds the Ministry of Transport and Works, then I imagine that there may arise some biases at that level. So my question there is how do we handle the cases which may arise in terms of biases that foreseeably can happen? I mean, you can't stop a person from having a bias, but we wouldn't want to go into a space where we're already, we want to have some form of balance. So how does the council, or how do you, I don't know, try to put a framework which assists the councils or the ministries or whatever to not display or have such a large bias that it becomes, I don't know, problematic going forward?
Thanks, Michelle. And we're here saying to ourselves that you really cannot legislate a person's integrity. A person comes to a task either with or without integrity. But you can put checks and balances in place. And I want to say to you that if an assembly, you use the word council, we're using the word assembly. If an assembly makes a decision that Johnson's Road, for example, should be the road repaired, you have 30 people who unanimously, or perhaps the overwhelming majority of them, say, look, Johnson's Road has not been repaired for 30 years. And they say that they're going to send a requisition off because we want the process to be formalized, in which the assembly sends a requisition, a request off to the Ministry of Transport and Works, advising that it is in the interest of the community to have Johnson's Road fixed. Now, a good parliamentary representative will support that, whether he wants Johnson's Road fixed or not. It will not be in his interest to go against the People's Assembly that voted unanimously to have Johnson Road fixed. So already you see developing a system of checks and balances. The parliamentary representative will have his bias, and he will want to fix a road in which he got 90% of the votes. But here it is, the People's Assembly says, no, we want this particular road fixed because there are several old ladies and children living in this area. It is muddy when it rains. We want this fixed. What do you think an intelligent parliamentary representative will do? He will follow the guidance or the instruction of the People's Assembly, because he places himself at risk if he goes against a People's Assembly. You see, the People's Assembly is representative of the people who voted for him.
She's also referring to the minister as well, though.
And the minister.
The minister might favor his own constituency.
Well, in terms of favoring his constituency, you see, we anticipate that the MTW, as happens now, will have a number of requests from parliamentary representatives. There are parliamentary representatives who petition the Minister of Transport and Works presently. Right now, it isn't done by a People's Assembly. So you have 29 parliamentary representatives begging and pleading with the Minister of Transport and Works to come to their constituency. That's at the national level. But locally, if you suggest that you want Road X done, I would think that your parliamentary representative should lobby the Ministry of Transport and Works to have that one done. But not only will he be lobbying them, it will be a formal process by which the People's Assembly writes a requisition, a formal document to MTW. So in a sense, you can say it bypasses the parliamentary representative. But as I said before, a good parliamentary representative will find himself associating with that decision. He will find himself having an idea or having knowledge as to what is going on at the people's assemblies. The question we advance towards now is this: will he be present? Will he be allowed to come to the meetings of the people's assemblies? I think my own view is, I think yes. I think that if the People's Assembly is holding a meeting with the residents in an area, I don't think you can exclude the parliamentary representative. As to whether he is bound by law to be there is a different question. As to whether you would have a system in which he sits on the stage with the People's Assembly, the public should advise us on that. But that is my answer to your question, and a good question too. No system is perfect, Michelle. You can't legislate people's integrity. People come with their character in whatever state it is. But the thing you do, you set up a system of checks and balances. You set up a system that is transparent, that nothing is secret, that what the People's Assembly is doing is done in public, because we anticipate that meetings of the People's Assemblies will be held in public places, so that John Brown, who lives in Haggett's and St. Andrew, can come to that meeting and say, look, my road has not been fixed for 40 years. I want it fixed now. And a properly functioning People's Assembly will give him a hearing. So we anticipate a democratic process, a process in which the people are genuinely involved. Because right now, how are the people involved? The people tend to be involved in terms of calling a minister or turning up to a branch meeting of one party or another. And branch meetings are exclusive. Branch meetings tend to embrace only the supporters of one party. The People's Assembly is now taking democracy out of the narrow confines of branch meetings and political parties and making it genuinely democratic, having a situation in which the people are genuinely participating in infrastructural and human capital development.
We have a
Thank
contribution
you.
from Facebook as well that is in conjunction with what Michelle would have offered. And they are suggesting that the budget will have to be adjusted as well to make sure that there are certain allocations to the requests from persons within the assemblies. So as to the exact number, because it's a discussion I've also had with someone else, as to the exact number, because MTW is going to have a number of roadworks projects that are not community-based. So for example, highways. Highways will not be in the interest of a particular community. However, budget must be allocated to making sure these particular roadworks are done. So we'll have to formalize the process as to how much of MTW's budget is going to have to go to projects like that, and what percentage will go to community works, so that it is already decided that this amount of the budget will go towards what the community has requested, so that when they make these requests, they will know that they have to really prioritize what they think is important, because this percentage of the budget is it. This is what you will be allocated. Make sure that what you request is really a representative of what the community says they see as a priority. So that was one suggestion that would have been made, and that is me adding to the contribution that would have been made by Mr. Wayne Hoyt on Facebook. If there are no other contributions at this point, I see Anne Blackman has her video on. I'm not sure if she wants to make a contribution. You're unmuted as well. So if you would like to make a contribution at this point, you can go ahead and do so. I think the video is frozen, but In the interim, if there's anyone else that would like to make a contribution, you can feel free to go ahead and do so.
Crystal, you mentioned the question of budgets and the ministry deciding as to whether they will have a portion of their budget for highways. You have someone else there? Oh, I thought I was hearing someone. Just let it be understood that the People's Assembly will not have a budget for roadworks. I don't think we've been proposing that. The People's Assembly, we anticipate, will be supported by government under a system in which government sends money to the People's Assembly for its administrative work. Obviously, you don't have a People's Assembly unless you have a local secretariat, which is probably the Assembly employing a secretary or a director of its affairs. We don't know. That is the language that can be decided on at some point in time. But I really want to say that the capital works that are done along the highways and within the communities will continue to be done by the Ministry of Transport and Works and not by a People's Assembly. I don't anticipate that the People's Assembly will have a budget in which it decides to do roads and to put in street lights. I don't think that will be the business of the Ministry of Transport and Works. That becomes a little complicated, and we want capital works to remain within the province of the Ministry of Transport and Works.
I think Ralph, what the suggestion Crystal is making, or that came from a contributor, is that a portion of the road maintenance or repair budget of the MTW should be reserved, set aside to service requisitions coming from the People's Assemblies. And that I could see that being very helpful. If the People's Assemblies, all 20 of them, know that there is a set aside to respond to their requisitions for the repairs of community roads, as opposed to major highways, community roads, that would make sense. Crystal, if there's no one there yet, there's something I want to share. That goes to the education function, and what brought it back to my mind recently is the recent incident where a 10-year-old boy is said to have stabbed to death his older sister, and you know, that ties back in with a lot of the problems of alienated and dysfunctional students in schools, some of whom engage in violent behavior, causing great distress in the school. And some years ago, I came up with the idea that we needed to have a national mentorship program that should be placed at the disposal of the managers of the primary and secondary schools of Barbados, where there could be a pool of mentors, and these mentors would be Barbadian citizens, mature persons who have already raised children and have demonstrated that they have the necessary parenting skills to raise children successfully and discipline children and so forth, and who would be willing voluntarily to make themselves available to be part of a national mentorship program where these mentors, and they could be vetted by the Ministry of Education and so forth, but the principal in a primary school faced with a problem student, a problem child, would be able to select a mentor to work not only with that child but also with that child's family, and to report back to the principal, etc. Similarly, in the secondary school, a guidance counselor, a group of mentors to be available to the guidance counselor in that school where there's a problem student that has been identified that might need that kind of assistance. So work with the student and the family. And I had actually proposed this to the two teachers' unions suggesting that they could collaborate with the Ministry of Education and put such a program in place. I didn't get a response from them, so I subsequently suggested it to the Ministry of Education. But it occurred to me just today that this is the type of program that a People's Assembly collaborating with the Ministry of Education and the schools in the Assembly area could help to put in place. So it's something that I personally want to add to the mix. I want to add it as a proposal to further flesh out the education function of the People's Assembly. So I am proposing that the People's Assembly could involve itself in putting together, in collaboration with the schools of the Assembly area and the Ministry of Education, a mentorship program that will make available to both primary and secondary schools in the Assembly area a group of mentors that would be available to the principals, to the guidance counselors, to call upon, to assist where there are problem students who need some additional help. So I trust that, I know that notes are being taken of this meeting, and that's a proposal I personally would like to put on the table for the consideration of the Thorne Commission on Local Governance. Back to you, Crystal.
Can I come in here?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. I want to fully support every single thing that David just mentioned. We're constantly seeing, ever so often, in the newspaper, in the media, situations similar to what happened with this 10-year-old. Look, more than 10 years ago, there was a proposal at Youth Affairs for a hotline. We had approval, a youth hotline. We had approval for that particular hotline. One of the companies were prepared to sponsor the hotline, and it was shut down. In recent times, we've heard of another hotline that came on stream. I don't know if it is still functioning. One of the things that I believe, in keeping with what David would have mentioned as far as the assemblies are concerned, look, we have youngsters within all of our communities who are in households with siblings that create a problem as it relates to studying. And I'm thinking that, and I'm trying to push it within the constituency of St. John, the thought of having study halls where those youngsters who are preparing either for CXCs, 11 plus, usually in that particular age range, can have a quiet locale in the constituency, maybe at community level where there's a church, that they can go and find maybe an hour or two to sit and focus on their schoolwork. And I'm thinking that with the onset of the People's Assembly, that an initiative such as that can come into play because there's a need for it. David would have mentioned the mentoring process, and I think that we should maybe look as well within the constituency and guided probably by the assembly to look at university where now it is proposed that those persons who are coming out of university must give back in terms of hours. And if we can have some of those same individuals coming on as mentors for those young people in the community, in society as a whole, I think it will go a long way. And this is something that can be coordinated by the People's Assembly. In St. John, I have a functioning St. John Development Council, a fledgling one is now coming on stream. But I am hoping that they will take that type of initiative as well. But I'm saying that on a wider scope, the constituencies who don't have such a development council, if the assemblies can actually do that, liaise with the BCC, UWI and help to mentor, select some of those persons to mentor some of our youngsters. And I think that that is all that is required. The more of us that are focused on a positive path, um, a positive road, sorry, as compared to those who are treading on a negative road. And then if we can find, if the People's Assembly could find those persons within the constituency, including the youngsters that I mentioned before, who are prepared to offer at least a couple hours every week to mentor some of these youngsters, I think maybe we will cut down on having to see 10-year-olds being highlighted in the paper for the kind of negative that we are now associating. So I fully support what David would have mentioned, and Adrian is right in the fact that yes, I have walked that community journey for more than 20 years, so I am familiar with it. And I think that is one of the ways that we should be going.
Okay. At this point, I will let Michelle finish her point. I think she wanted to give a response. So you can go ahead, Michelle, and add your response to what has been said.
I just wanted to, in addition to what I had asked previously, I just wanted to inquire about the accountability of, I know of course that a People's Assembly will be accountable to the people within the constituency that they represent. But I wanted also to know, is that body responsible or answerable to an overriding body? So there are 10 or 12 People's Assembly, and is there an overriding body for them? And also I had asked about what's the foreseeable start date of the assemblies, but I had not gotten an answer for that. So I still wanted to know what is your goal, projected date that you would like to start the assemblies. I'm asking that, of course, because I imagine that people will be interested. They will want to know what the process would be like for them to become a part of, the roles that they will play within such an assembly. So those are the things that I think that is also important to know.
Michelle, if I may, David Commichon here. It's not within the power of the Thorne Commission to say exactly when it will start. We are going to do our level best to provide the cabinet with the final paper by Independence Day this year. But just like you, I think we feel that it needs to start really as soon as possible, because with every passing day, we see evidence in our society of why we need people's assemblies. But truth be told, it's not within our power. It goes to cabinet. Cabinet will discuss it. Cabinet will make final decisions. Cabinet will then take it to Parliament. So there's that procedure. But we would hope, and we would definitely, I know, be making a very strong recommendation that the system be implemented as soon as possible, and definitely during the course of 2021. We have already met with the Electoral and Boundaries Commission. We have already alerted them, and they have already started to do their preparatory work in terms of helping us to work out how we will demarcate the assembly areas for voting purposes and representational purposes and so forth. So the other issue that you raised about accountability, well, our thinking thus far is that you will have these 20 assemblies. Each assembly will select or elect a chairperson, and the 20 chairpersons will then sit in a chairperson's caucus with a revolving chairmanship, and that chairperson's caucus will have some oversight over the 20 assemblies. But in addition to that, it is our thinking that the Act of Parliament that establishes the assembly system, we will also have bylaws that would include a code of conduct, a code of discipline, that will include the do's and don'ts. We anticipate that we will produce a members manual that will outline in clear language what is expected and what is not expected, and there will be some code of discipline as well. We also anticipate that the People's Assemblies will be making annual reports to Parliament. In other words, the People's Assembly, having been established by an Act of Parliament, will have some degree of accountability to the Parliament of Barbados. So the Parliament of Barbados will have some oversight in terms of scrutinizing annual reports coming from the People's Assembly. We also anticipate that the Accountant General's office will have some oversight over the financial affairs of the People's Assembly. So I hope that answers your questions. Back to you, Crystal.
We have a number of questions and comments coming in from both the Zoom and Facebook. So I'll go through a few of them. One of the questions is whether the final proposal that would have been a combination of all the town halls that we would have gone to and the input we received from the public, if that will be released before it is submitted to cabinet. And it might even suggest that we may have to have a final town hall to discuss the proposal that will be submitted so that persons can have an idea of what is going to be going forward. That's my suggestion, that we would have to likely consider that, but you can also give your input as well.
David is next to me saying that we could consider it, but what we are doing now constitutes the consultation, and the person is asking us if at the end of it, when we collate this document, if we will come and share it with the public before we send it to cabinet. That may be a little indelicate if we are sending a document to cabinet, and as you know, the meetings of cabinet are conducted secretly. I don't think it is the best of practices to say this is the document we are sending to cabinet. What we are doing now, and we want the public to trust us as much as we trust the public in coming to the public at this stage. What we are doing now, we are putting together all the ideas from the public. We're not excluding anything. Let me pause and say again to Mr. Hunt that he came up with such a brilliant idea last week. I was driving here and I remembered it today, his idea of having a few senators taken from the People's Assemblies. I cannot see us sending a document to cabinet and excluding that. As to whether the government will implement it is another question. But please trust us to send to cabinet what the public has reflected by these deliberations. We will do it. If there's and we have not heard any outlandish suggestions. So I'm not going to say that we will leave something out because it is outlandish. We expect that we will put all 11 of us will come together and send a document together to cabinet which genuinely reflects the feelings of the people of Barbados. And Crystal, you've gone from St. Lucie to St. Philip with us, and we're not seeing the wheel reinvented. It is only Mr. Hunt's proposal, which we did not hear anywhere. And as I said before, we cannot send a document to cabinet unless we include Mr. Hunt's proposal. So I don't think, to answer the question in that by that long response, that it is proper for us to share that document with the public, the same document that we intend to send to the cabinet. What we can do by way of compromise, at the end of it all, as Adrian was suggesting, at the end of it, we have a final town hall meeting for the whole of Barbados and the diaspora, in which we can put a document together we can say, look, these are the 100 principles that we intend to include. But at the end of the day, the 11 of us going to some deliberation and send the document to cabinet, collated from what we've heard from the public. So yes, as to a final town hall meeting, we can do that before we actually compile cabinet's document.
What I will add to that is the Ministry of People's Empowerment has been taking copious, very detailed notes of all of the contributions we've had at every town hall, much more detailed than what I would probably do for myself. So it has given us almost a verbatim idea of what persons want included. So hopefully you will be very well represented in having your contributions included in the final submission.
Still, before you go to the next Zoom person, someone raised the matter with David this week. And look, David has been involved in public discourse and social activism for how many years? For close to 40 years, David. So I don't think David comes to this exercise with any sensitivity. And the member raised the member of the public raised the question as to whether these persons should be paid. And that is something we want the public to discuss. Our minds are not closed on it. I remember we had a deliberation with the workers' unions in Barbados, and some of the persons there felt that assembly men and women should be paid. So that I want to assure the public that our minds are not closed to that. If you're asking somebody to sit in his community, perhaps sit, depending on the community, once a week, sometimes twice a week, he has to drive there, he has to spend his time there. If he feels that he should be compensated minimally or nominally, I don't see how we could quarrel with that. We want the public to say how it genuinely feels. Do they genuinely feel that it should be voluntary? Or does the public believe that you should incentivize service and offer stipend, honorarium, or some small amount of money for representation? Because somebody's going to tell us, look, parliamentarians are paid for representing. Why should not assemblymen be paid for the same representation of the people's interests? Our minds are not closed on that.
If I may just follow up on that, because the idea did emerge that even though assemblymen and women would not be paid cash for their services, not be paid in money for their services, that there are certain perks that could be extended to them in appreciation and to offer some kind of compensation for their services. For example, one idea that was mentioned at one of our town hall meetings is that they could be given the privilege to travel free on the buses of Barbados, right? But we didn't hear that was one idea that was advanced, but we did not hear other suggestions as to perks that could be extended to assemblymen and women in appreciation for their services, in acknowledgement of the important function that they're performing, and to provide them with some kind of compensation. So it would be interesting if people could come up with other kinds of perks that would be reasonable and that could be accorded assemblymen and women for the service that they perform. The only thing, I think it would be ideal to pay people, but we have to face the reality that Barbados, we are in a very difficult financial situation, and we are going to be for not just Barbados, but the entire world that has been afflicted by this COVID-19 economic-based crisis. Things are going to be very difficult financially for governments going forward. So we really need to bear that in mind. But I'm thinking that in lieu of actual monetary compensation, that there may be various perks that could be extended to assemblymen and women.
Definitely agree with that sentiment. I will add that I think at a minimum, persons who volunteer should be reimbursed for any expenses they do incur. So as much as it's a voluntary effort, there's going to be difficulty even if we do decide that they would be paid. What is an adequate amount that you're going to pay persons that does not make them feel as though, is this all you think my contribution is worth? And that is also something that would have been part of the discussions that I would have heard as well too, in terms of the pros and cons of paying persons for voluntary services. But definitely, if they incur expenses on behalf of serving the assembly, I strongly think that they should be reimbursed for those, because you're volunteering, and volunteering should not cost you when you're giving of your time for free. And we would definitely have to make sure that they're pre-approved reimbursements. So you wouldn't want some person, for instance, running off and doing something on behalf of the assembly and then informing after the fact and then expecting to be reimbursed. So you will have those discussions up front, but that was my contribution to that area. We have a number of persons that would have asked about how persons will be selected for these assemblies. I'd like to re-emphasize that the community within which the assembly is based, those residents will be voting for the persons who will be sitting on these assemblies. So no one will be hand selected or picked by any MP or even any member of this commission. It is completely up to the persons who are part of the community to decide who they want to represent them. So I advise you to choose well. Do not choose persons because of political favor, and then when nothing gets done in your community, you blame the assembly. You want persons who are very good at negotiating, because obviously they're going to have to represent your interests amongst other competing interests. And we have to be realistic. You want a person who knows how to get things done. So those are the kind of persons that you're going to want to vote for to sit on these assemblies for yourselves. Just to share the sentiments of Katrina, she said that she's a young lady living in Gall Hill, St. John, and she wants to know what more can be done for the youth. Growing up in this parish for all of her life, they've had access to a lot of activities that kept them occupied. Right now, there are 3 buildings that are not in use anymore that can be used to host activities. There's also a huge playing field that maybe a few days a week, coaches from the NSC can come and coach football, basketball, and any other sports. I have 3 children, and I know they would gladly love this. And to Katrina, I think that when the people's assemblies come into play, these are the kind of things that you should definitely be lobbying for, to have those who are representing you place these as a priority. We do have various subcommittees, and under the one for community development, this definitely will fall into that category. This is the opportunity for you to push to have things that are within the community's best interest, within your family's best interest, heard and lobbied for, and to encourage other residents that this is something that they should all be thinking about and all be lobbying for, so that it's not just your voice, your one voice in the wilderness, but you have the engagement of other members of the community so that you can be represented and have these things implemented.
I want to come back in here because I think it's important for me to put on the record that my feeling, my deep and profound feeling, is that members, assemblymen and women, should not be paid. My deep feeling is that we are at a stage in the evolution of our country where we have to re-emphasize and redevelop this ethic of citizens voluntarily and in a patriotic manner giving back to their country, to their communities, to their fellow citizens, even in a sacrificial manner. And this is an ethic that is still located in the churches. People give voluntary service to their churches. People belong to various service organizations where they give voluntary service. People give voluntary service in their community groups and their youth clubs and so forth. And I think that we should try to redevelop that ethic in Barbados. The furthest I would go from in deviating from that is to say, well, I could see a case being made that if a person is serving their community, that if there's certain, I call them perks, certain benefits that the state could extend to them that might even help them in their work. As one that clearly makes sense and that was put on the table early was to be able to travel freely on the public buses of Barbados. I mean, a person has to do some work in the community, they need to travel. Why should it not be permitted to travel freely on the buses of the public buses of Barbados, the government buses? And I think if we could come up with other similar kinds of benefits that could be extended, but I would not like us to open up the idea that one has to be paid for doing community service. I mean, there are volunteers in the Department of Emergency Management, for example, people who come out when this country is faced with hurricanes or other forms of storms and bad weather, and who serve their community, sometimes in dangerous circumstances. And I don't think they're paid, and I think that is a very healthy ethic that we have to try to redevelop in Barbados. And actually, going forward in this COVID-19 environment, we have to develop an ethic of helping each other. We are going to have, as a nation, to try to get through this very difficult period, and we are only going to get through unscathed if we develop that ethic of helping each other wherever we can help, to see that we have a duty to help our fellow citizens. So I just want to put that very clear, because that was my position from the outset. And even after all these town hall meetings, and even hearing people making a case for payment, I still remain convinced that the way to go is voluntary, patriotic service.
And before you move on there from that matter, Crystal, the contributor had mentioned about having more sporting activities at God Hill St. John. I know the National Sports Council just had a program called Bid Fit, where they went into every parish of Barbados at least twice per week, and it was pretty much successful. I started for the summer vacation, but I want to let her know it's going to be started in September whenever school resumes. But from this part now, she could come through whenever the people's assemblies are established, and we can make a recommendation through her and the assembly to the National Sports Council asking for more activities in the parish of St. John. Seeing that it is a successful, where we had the last 2 or 3 months, the numbers were increasing. There are more young people getting involved in the physical activity. She just has to, through the assemblies, make that requisition and ensure that the sports council would readily come on board. So that's an example of how the People's Assembly could work, getting information and feedback from members of the community. I know, for example, there are a number of young people there who have been doing community work for years. Bernard Howell, Evan Vaughan. They take sporting teams all over the length of breast in Barbados to take part in activities. They don't get no remuneration at the end of the day. Sometimes the boys don't have bus fare or referees fees to pay. And these fellas pay these prices out of their own pockets, which is very hard at the end of the day. So there are community people already doing very good work in each community, and St. John is no different. So I would ask that young lady, whenever we get established, to go that route. And I hope that she comes out and volunteer her services.
There's some very heated debate on the Facebook that I'd like to address. 2 issues before going to the other questions. One is in relation to being able to see the summary of the contributions that would have been made across the town halls, and persons expecting to see that before it goes to cabinet. Now, number one, everything that has been discussed with at these town halls is publicly available. You have the initial proposal, which is on our social media channel, that is available. Every single town hall and every single contribution is also publicly available, as is this one. And you can review all of them on our Facebook channel. And from my understanding, they've also been posted otherwise. So nothing that has been done is a secret. There are no secrets. If you want to know about the contributions that have been made, they're all widely available, and you can review them at any point in time to be able to see what persons would have said. So to make it seem as though we're going to secretly prepare a final document that does not have in-person's contributions, everything that would have been discussed is readily available for you to review if you wish to. But the final decision then that will be made by cabinet would obviously, from listening to all of the discourse we've had over the last year and seeing the initial proposal and hearing us discuss all of the suggestions that would have been made, you'd then be able to make a comparison for yourself between what we would have discussed, what our initial proposal was, what we said that we would include, and what you see as the final document. So there are no secrets. In terms of whether persons should be paid or not paid, that is being actively discussed, and this is one that might be a bit contentious because there are great points for being paid and for not being paid. So this one, I think, is going to be the most difficult area in terms of what we're going to come up with the proposal, because as Ralph would have said, a lot of the things that we would have discussed, you could get a sense of what the majority of people would like. But where it comes to this particular area, I'm beginning to feel as though there is a divide as to what people would like to see. So hopefully we get some more input from persons as to having reasons as to why persons should or should not be paid, because even though you have a majority, it's very helpful to have that discourse as to the reasons why it is best to pay persons or best to not pay persons, to have persons volunteering. We need that input because this seems to be a very hot topic area of discussion. And going through the discourse, there's no one correct answer for this particular one. Before I come to MP Charles Griffith, I think someone else wanted to come back in and raise. Yes, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and make your contribution.
Okay, let me start by saying I'm looking at Ericsson's theory on human development. And he speaks to the issue, he theorized the issue that when one reaches a certain stage in their lives, they get this sense of wanting to give back to the community. And based on that, I don't think that persons who volunteer to serve on this committee should be paid. I think they should give of themselves freely without having to be paid. This satisfaction, I believe, should be to see that things are done in a way that it brings success to the community. So that's my position. I don't think they should be paid, right? But my other thing now is that, and I was thinking in the situation, and I'm looking at my MP, Mr. Griffith. Now, the selection process would involve one, identifying persons from the community by members who live in that community. Our MP lives in the community. What when that process unfolds, he or any MP who lives in a particular community, would they be part of the selection and the voting process? Therein lies part of the challenge. How I would expect, I would listen to Thorne to respond to that part.
They can vote. Of course they can vote. As long as you live in the geographical community, you can vote. And you said selection, you mean election. There will be no selection.
Election.
Yes, if Brother Charles, I don't know where Charles lives, but if he lives in St. John, of course he can vote for his local assembly person. You can't exclude him. You'll be discriminating against him, and that's not constitutional.
Absolutely, and I don't think so either.
Thank you very much.
Just come in quickly because I think we really need to clear up this matter. not about the payment. The Thorne Commission will make that decision, but we'll make that recommendation. But we need people to understand that this 11-person commission, which contains a diversity of persons, you have young, old, black, white, Indian, male, female, community practitioners, one member of parliament. It's a very diverse group. This 11-person commission has been given a mandate by the government of Barbados, and the mandate is to use their collective wisdom to come up with a concept of people's assemblies that they collectively will recommend to the cabinet of Barbados. So what we are doing, we have also been mandated to consult with the people of Barbados. So that's what we are doing. We are consulting, we are engaging in discussion, we are getting suggestions. But at the end of the day, it is this 11-person commission that has to consider all that has come before it, has to consider its own ideas, and come up with a final product that makes sense to this 11-person commission that we will then in turn recommend to the cabinet of Barbados. So I wouldn't like any misconceived message to go out there that the function of this commission is simply to collect everything that has been said to us and put together a report that contains everything that has been said to us. That would be kind of nonsensical. We obviously have to exercise our own judgment and discretion, and we have to produce a document that reflects our own collective wisdom and our own considered point of view after giving. Remember, we would have been working on this for well over a year, and so we will present to cabinet what we think is best based on all that we have seen and our own independent judgment. Once we have done that, however, please bear in mind that it is still up to the cabinet of Barbados to have to make their input, because at the end of the day, this will be a major government program, a major government policy, and obviously the cabinet of Barbados will have the final decision, because it's something that they have to feel comfortable with. It's something that they have to want to give their stamp of approval. So I just want us to be very, very clear as to exactly what the process is. But rest assured, you may only be seeing the four of us here this evening, but it's actually an 11-person commission, and it includes a number of persons with many, many decades of experience in community work. Back to you, Crystal.
Yes.
It was finished?
I think that MP Charles Griffith wanted to say something.
Yes, Crystal. Just to respond to Katrina, Adrian would have mentioned the sports. COVID would have shut down a lot, as we all know. Just prior to COVID, we were looking to do a track club at God Hill. I have a young lady who is prepared to do some free piano lessons at the community center. So activities are coming. And as mentioned before, I fully expect that when the assemblies are up and running, that these activities will be multiplied tenfold within the constituency. So I'm at ease, just let Katrina know that things are coming, things are in place, and as soon as we can start some of the programs, they will be happening at God.
That's good to hear. Just to reiterate some of the areas that we would have addressed before, but it would have been earlier up in the discussion. Someone was asking what some of the subcommittees of the proposed people's assemblies would include. And just to go over briefly, the functions would include oversight of government agencies, community well-being teams, and these teams will be working in conjunction with the Department of Emergency Management, the Environment and Road Repairs Committee, Education, Community Development and Sports, Vendor Licenses, Community Forums, Planning Permissions, Government Development Planning, People's Cooperative, and we've also had proposals for Commerce, Innovation, and Cultural Retention, and they would, of course, always be lobbying for anything with financial education, because I think that's paramount to persons being able to thrive in their communities, to understand finances, budgeting, taxation, how to manage a small business, a household. I definitely will always advocate for that personally. So hopefully we get a lot of persons volunteering that have the financial expertise to assist these different subcommittees, and not just for the finance community. All of the areas that we would have discussed, we would love if persons who have the expertise in these particular areas would come forward and volunteer so that they can make sure that their particular subcommittee in their community thrives because of the expertise that you will be adding to help your community.
Could you please remind the public that the members of this commission are not being paid, and that
Yes,
we have
being paid.
we are not being paid, and we have not requested any payment. That up to the point when we finish this work, we will not have requested any payment from government, and we are not requesting any payment from government. Thank you very much.
It's a complete volunteer effort, and again, the same sentiment applies. You have to make sure that the persons who are doing it for the love of their communities, because then you know that their motives are solely geared towards that endeavor. And I'm not saying that that means that a person who is being paid does not love their community, but it definitely takes away the question as to whether some person is doing it because they want to just get some other form of payment, or as to whether they're doing it for love of community. So I reiterate, no one on this commission has been paid, and we've been volunteering for this for over a year, giving up our time. And not all of us are in a position where we are financially comfortable and free. So it's persons from all different backgrounds and all different areas of the community who have given up this service. Someone is asking if there would be a safety committee. Yes, that's not the exact name for it, but the community well-being team will be established to provide oversight and assistance programs to protect children, elders, disabled persons, and needy residents in conjunction with the Department of Emergency Management. That team is definitely going to be the no man left behind team. And out of that, you can have watch groups, you can have persons who make sure that the elderly are taken care of, that they're not sick in their homes and no one's keeping an eye on them, making sure that children who are in situations where their homes are not the safest, that the community is aware of it, that the assembly is aware of it so that they can put things in place. And hopefully even coming out of this, the bodies that are responsible for being able to protect our children, our elderly, our disabled, everyone, that their voices as well can be heard, because we do know that the reality is a lot of these services are either overwhelmed or they don't have the support they need to get the important work that they're doing done. So I am hoping that this collaborative effort will help them to help us. We really want to bring back that feeling of being your brother's keeper especially within the community. There's humongous value in building relationships with the people within your communities that you live amongst, that you're next door to. That is crucially important. So I hope that answers your question, Rhea. Me see if there are any other questions, because I know Facebook was hopping with a lot of comments as well. Thank you as well for the positive feedback. I may not mention every positive comment that is here because I am trying to address the questions, but just to let the others on the panel know that there is a lot of positive feedback as well coming through on the Facebook live stream. So you can be encouraged by that as well. And just to add to the persons on Facebook, it's not only old retired persons that can volunteer for these community groups. There are persons who volunteer across Barbados for free every single day that come from all sectors of the community. They're well-to-do, they're persons who are struggling, they're persons who work with their hands, they're persons who work with their brains. We don't want to exclude one group or elevate one over the other. All persons within Barbados are welcome to volunteer as long as they have the heart and the time to give back to their community. This is for you. This isn't for some random person. This is to make your community that you live in better. And we're trying to make sure that persons have that voice that has been excluded for so long. People have been complaining for a long time that their voices are not heard, decisions are made without their input. This is now the tool that is going to hopefully help you to be able to have a say in what happens in your communities. So I am hoping persons see the value that can come out of it, even if all of the logistics are not hammered out or worked out. That's why we definitely would love your input, because if there's something that we have not seen that will cause these assemblies to not work, we would love to have your input before we make any proposals, because we want to make sure that the final product is something that is effective. It sounds good in theory, and we know that there are a lot of realities that are going to make this endeavor difficult. So whatever you can suggest that is going to make this an easier process, we welcome it and we embrace it.
I think we need to get over the idea that we expect these people's assemblies to be populated by the genuine community leaders drawn from the communities all across Barbados. Every community will know who are the one or two persons from within the community that they see as their community leaders. So once a People's Assembly election is announced for that particular People's Assembly, the people in the community will have the opportunity to nominate. I mean, the process a person could go forward to their fellow community members and say, look, I would like to go up as a candidate for this community. Or community members could approach a person and say, look, we see you as a very effective leader. You are the kind of person we would like to see on the People's Assembly representing our community. We want to nominate you. We want to put you up. So that's the kind of thing, but the whole idea is that we should have on these assemblies the real leaders of the community, who the people have confidence in. The people know who their community leaders are. And as we said, the process of elections will be very transparent. Nobody will be selecting anybody. It will be a question if their if there are people actually contending for the number of seats available, then people will vote, and whoever gets the higher number of votes will be the one elected. Maybe you may find that you don't require a vote because you don't have more persons coming forward as candidates as their places on the People's Assembly. But the point is, any nomination of a candidate will come from people within the community who know who their leaders are, or who they would wish to have as their leaders.
You can go ahead with your question. You can unmute yourself.
Okay, let me first start by saying I agree with you, Crystal, that financial intelligence is very important, because I see that as one of the vehicles that can move persons out of poverty. But so much for that. I want now to look at the issue with, well, really and truly, it's a question. Is there going to be a segment set up for alternative dispute resolution? And I'm thinking, that justices of the peace can play a part in it, because I think there's a lot more work that we can get out of the justice of the peace.
I actually think that question, I'm trying to remember which town hall that came up at, but that came up previously in terms of having like small disputes where persons would, can you give me 1 second? I do not think my battery is plugged in.
Oh, you're back?
Oh,
okay.
Yes, I thought my battery was plugged in, but it was not. There was a discussion about having small disputes settled within the People's Assemblies. So you have a kind of arbitration going on where you utilize, yes, the JPs to be able to say, if you have this argument or this dispute, and you obviously don't want to go through the court system because that has its own complications, if the People's Assemblies would be able to conduct those kind of small disputes. So I will turn over to the lawyers to have their input. If they can even remember where this would have originally come up, that definitely would be helpful as well.
Crystal and Julian, in England, I don't know what obtains now, but in the smallest courts, the judicial officer previously was not a lawyer. And Julian's suggestion,
civil servants.
Precisely, and your suggestion, Julian, is very, very interesting. Again, you're out of the realm of People's Assemblies and you're into the judicial system. But it's an interesting suggestion. A lot of the matters that come to the courts, in the country courts, or that is to say the magistrates' courts, there is more common sense to be applied than any legal principle. And I say that to say that is why in some countries you have not needed a lawyer to resolve disputes. You just needed someone of maturity, someone of integrity, and someone of intelligence. That's an interesting suggestion, but I wouldn't want you to think that you would have a People's Assembly, Julian, in which you have a court system operating within that people. You're a police officer, by the way. Do I recognize you? I'm sorry to be asking you that.
You would have seen me in court on South Hill.
Oh, okay. All right, don't say.
Officer.
Oh, right. I thought you looked familiar. Sorry to be blowing your cover.
That's
but
all right.
It is interesting. It is a proposal again that can be made at national level, Julian. That perhaps the time has come when a layperson can sit with the magistrate, or a layperson can sit as the magistrate in matters, domestic disputes, minor property disputes like landlord and tenant and so on, the maintenance cases. Quite often there's not a lot of law involved, and justices of the peace could probably sit. David is saying next to me, justices of the peace could probably sit as judicial officers in the magistrates' court. So that's an excellent suggestion. Thanks for making it.
Yes, I agree.
You're welcome.
Definitely help the communities where they could see justice coming about quickly, because I know that's something that's usually an area of contention, feeling as though it doesn't make any sense even taking this matter to court, but you obviously haven't received any justice for what you would have endured. So if the People's Assemblies can serve or have that function included, I think that will help with a lot of the very small cases that, as Ralph rightly said, they don't necessarily even involve a lot of law. You just have to hear persons represent themselves or have someone represent them that can show why this person was disadvantaged. We have a question coming from Carol Harris with regards to how will duplication of services be managed. Are members of the public supposed to contact the MP or the People's Assemblies or the government agency? We are hoping that persons will utilize the People's Assemblies because the People's Assemblies will be collaborating with all of these persons. So you can channel your areas of concern through the People's Assemblies. And once it is something that the majority of the community believes is an area of concern, this will then be channeled up the line so that you can avoid having to be, first of all, getting me running around from so many different persons, but also knowing that there is going to be a formal process to have your concerns heard. Of course, then you're depending on your concern being something that the majority of the community sees as a concern, but that is how a democracy works. If it's only one person that wants something done, unfortunately, unless you're able to lobby other persons to join your cause, what the majority wants is usually what's going to happen. But we're hoping that the People's Assemblies, as Barbadians become accustomed to them, that they will become the go-to place to have your concerns heard and lobbied for. We have about 1 minute left. So, if there are any other questions that persons have, any other concerns, you can feel free to share them. In the interim, if there are any closing remarks from the members of the panel or from our MP Charles Griffith, you can feel free to share them at this time.
Ricky, we can get another. Mr. Redmond has generously given us a few extra minutes, and I felt we have a sports specialist on this panel, Mr. Donovan, and sports as a human endeavor is extremely important. And we have a crisis now in Barbados, and Charles would appreciate this. We have a crisis in Barbados in which a lot of the sports fields are underutilized, whether young people are on the computers, whether they're afraid to go outdoors, and our sport, our cricket is suffering, our football is suffering, I think, in terms of the best or the players of highest aptitude not playing. And People's Assemblies may have a role in getting our playing fields active again. And I wondered whether Adrian, who is here as a sports specialist with the National Sports Council, would want to address the issue of the whether he thinks that the sporting grounds in Barbados are underutilized, whether we're having fewer people involved in sports, and of course what role the People's Assemblies can play in terms of revitalizing sports in Barbados. That's extremely important, Crystal, and I think we should give Adrian a chance to say something about it.
That's a very good point, Ralph. I read in the press a few weeks ago, and it hurt my heart that there was a senior sports administrator in this Barbados who stated publicly that he would like to see all the cricket fields dug up in Barbados and plant yam or potatoes. Because his analysis, going through the cricket system as it is now, those clubs that had 3 teams previously, now only have 1. Anytime you really send the sun, you are seeing teams losing games by default. School teams, unfortunately nowadays, can't raise 11 boys to play a match. Some schools are having to join together to get 11 boys to play on a Saturday. There's some school teams who don't have a team at all. And the one that hurt my heart the most is that last year, Bay Primary School could not field a cricket team to play in the Herman Griffith Primary School competition. This is Bay Primary. This is the home of the greatest all-rounder of all time, Sir Garvey Sobers. The team in that area, Bayland, struggling right now to find 11 men. And we just spent thousands of dollars to furnish that lovely facility now in the name of Sir Garfield Soper's. So these things hurt my heart. I mean, Ralph mentioned this. Um, Technology has improved, has gone on, but at the detriment of our young people. When you pass in the afternoon and night time, playing fields now are unoccupied. We were blessed by the former Prime Minister Owen Arthur, who put 87 playing fields under construction and have lights across Barbados. Every parish in Barbados has at least 4 or 5 facilities with lights, whether it's a basketball, football, netball, volleyball, whatever. And every time you pass in the community at night time, the fields are underutilized. I will hear arguments that means that the facilities are not open. But once you make the request to the sports council, arrangements will be put in place to have that facility open. But too many young people now are not going to our playing fields. And I'm glad again Ralph mentioned this. St. John, for example, and the Honorable Minister will know this, he is blessed with so much young people in that area. Anytime he puts on his road tennis competition like he did a few weeks ago, he has a large turnout. He has a football tournament going. The St. John Cultural is a vibrant club. Night cricket. The response is good. So we have to get more young people involved and getting more young people on the people's assemblies themselves could create more competitions and more activities. There's no reason why the St. John playing field and the hardcourt, the St. John Pavilion is one of the best in Barbados, one of the biggest, but maybe underutilized because we need to get programs in place. And through the people's assemblies, we could get more young people involved. And every afternoon, there should be some kind of activity in Gorhill St. John. It is underutilized and is one of the best facilities in Barbados. I'm hoping that they appreciate it. You have a lot of community people who are willing to help, and we are open. We are willing to assist the people not only in St. John but across the life and breadth of Barbados.
People, why have young people retreated from afternoon recreation on fields? Do you have an answer for that?
Unfortunately, Ralph, is technology. The laptops, the iPads, the computers, all kind of devices have not taken up time. And our statistics indicate from Professor Frazier that 1 out of every 3 of our children in Barbados are either overweight or obese. 1 out of 3. So it is a serious problem. There are too many young people in this country now who are not taking part in any physical activity at school or recreational at home in community. And it needs to be addressed. There needs to be a national consensus, a national effort to bring our young people back to the playing fields. And Chris said, I'm not leaving the older ones too. We also have programs for the old people. We have a very good swimming program island-wide for people over 40. And going very well, so you are especially invited too.
I definitely encourage physical fitness at any age because you don't want childhood obesity to become a problem within the country. And if the communities can help to encourage or to discourage this, I am all for it. But as you get older, I would testify to that, you definitely begin to see problems with mobility and flexibility and things that you used to be able to do in your 20s. Even in your 30s, you're struggling to do. So getting persons to put down the laptop, the tablet, the cell phone, and the social media and pay attention, make it engaging. And I think this is why the dance community pre-COVID would have thrived so much because people love dance, especially when the dancing doesn't have to be all pretty and choreographed, but fun and engaging and makes persons just want to get up and move, where you're exercising without realizing it. Maybe we have to find ways that persons are exercising without realizing it and get to see the benefits and the values. Because exercise is unfortunately one of those things you don't see the results overnight. It takes a long while before you can see that, but it's definitely something I would love to see the People's Assembly put some laser focus into. We have a comment from, I lost the person who made the comment, but the sentiment was basically that everyone within the communities may not know who their leaders are, but this is why we're emphasizing that the persons must provide a community profile so that persons will be able to have an idea of who is representing them and why they think that they would be a good leader or representative for the particular assembly. Because of that very same reason, I've been living here. I'm on the board of St. Michael and St. George, and I've been living here for 4 years, and I only know a few persons within this area. So I myself would be in that category where I don't know who all of my community leaders are. I know for sure Sean King, I think that's his name, is one. He's a mechanic that lives near the Norman Ells roundabout that raises so much awareness about the needs of the community, even beyond our particular community. I know that Corey Springer, who has the Hurt Foundation, he also raises a lot of awareness about the needs of persons within the community. And those are two definite community activists that I know. But I am sure that there are a ton more within my neighborhood that I have no clue about. So having that community profile to help show persons, this is what I've been doing. These are the results that I've been able to get. This is why I think I can really add value to this assembly. That's going to be critically important so that all persons will be able to have an awareness of who they're voting for.
Crystal, I think I said in St. Lucie that the faith-based organizations, I've been told to say faith-based organizations and not the church. I think they're in a ready-made position to populate these assemblies. We have a meeting coming up with the faith-based organizations shortly. And in terms of community leaders and community leadership, the pastors, the priests, I would hope and expect that persons like that put themselves forward for election. And I'm sure if a man is a pastor of a church or a priest at a parish church, he can get some votes. So I would like to encourage the churches. The churches complain about not, or the country complains that the church is not sufficiently involved in the community. This is a perfect opportunity for the church to go beyond its walls and to go into the secular areas of Barbados and the secular activity of Barbados and get involved at the local level in a very, very meaningful way.
The church leader is not always or the faith-based leader is not always the person who can volunteer as well. I know that a lot of my community service would have come from when I was young as serving on various community-based programs in church. So we would have done a lot of outreach, and that's where you would have developed with some persons that spirit of volunteering and giving back and wanted to make sure that persons are taken care of. So it's not limited to just your church or community or faith-based leaders, but persons who are quietly giving back to their churches, their communities, their faith-based groups, and not getting that recognition. This is also an opportunity for you to step forward and be recognized for the work that you've been doing tirelessly over the years and never really getting to be at the forefront. Again, you can serve quietly, but at least at a community level where your ability to serve extends beyond your faith-based community.
Still with us? Charles Griffith is still with us?
Yes, I'm here, Ralph.
Okay.
I'm here. A couple of things. The sports that Adrian mentioned, one of the things that I would love to see the assembly look at in terms of maybe the subcommittee is the same sports. Now, Katrina would have mentioned the lack of activities on the pasture. There's an issue where a year ago I had promised the primary schools that I would start that track club. Now, subsequent to that, I found out you must have a level 1 coach attached to the track club in order for that club to be recognized by the Athletic Association. Coaching in Barbados is one of the critical things as it relates to the development of our young people and sports. And if the assembly can decentralize some of the training programs. Now, not only training. Well, let me speak to the sports, but you have persons who may be good at a particular discipline, but when they transfer to become a coach, then it is not a natural progression to say that because I was, let's say, for example, a national player, that I can make a good coach. And one of the things that I would love for the assembly to do would be to decentralize the training of coaches. I guess in some areas it is a particular thing, obviously, but there are also coaching programs that are neutral, that can straddle um, the different disciplines. And if we can have that kind of decentralized training for persons at community level, then if we can find locations within different communities outside of Gore Hill, for example, that I can have satellite sporting programs, it will strengthen the community. In a similar vein, I have been trying now for more than a year to find someone who would have exited the arts program at Barbados Community College to restart a cultural program at the community center, namely dance. And I'm yet to find that particular individual. So I can see a
Charles,
role for the
Charles,
yes.
beg your pardon. Before you go to dance, I want to ask you something about sports. Not to stop you, you can go on about the dance.
Not a
Are you
problem.
finding that in your community, Galhill especially, that children are and teenagers are involved in spontaneous sporting activity on afternoons?
Yes,
That's some of your community.
it is still
Oh,
happening.
okay,
You will find
okay.
one or two guys on the basketball court scrimmaging. For sure, you will find um, footballers on the pasture that are, having their own thing. Um, Cricket, I'm trying to see how best that I can resuscitate a lot of what is happening in that culture, but there is a need for it. There is definitely a need to have additional programs, but you don't want to put youngsters in the hands of individuals who just say, I'm a coach, and then you have a lot of damage done as it relates to one, the discipline, and discipline in both instances, the sporting discipline and discipline as an individual coming up. What I'm trying to do is to ensure that the programs that are placed in St. John from now, that there's a development, there's a social skills are added to the program. So you don't just come on evening, for example, and go through all of the football drills, go and change and go home. There must be evenings where self-development is a part of the process. So you have somebody come in and teach them, or you deal with anger management, you deal with conflict resolution. So it must be a holistic program that is coming. I don't want just to have programs where people come and run up and down, then go home, and that's it. Because to me, it is a disservice to the young people now to do that. And hence why I'm thinking that the People's Assembly can do something like that. Provide coaching programs for persons who will go beyond just teaching the raw skills of the particular discipline. It must be a holistic approach to stop some of those 10-year-olds from repeating what happened a week ago or whenever it did. So I see the People's Assembly as having a key role to play in the development of young persons, in the sense of that particular having those type of initiatives, whether it be training, whether it be providing the life skills that are required outside or fused to the particular discipline that they're doing. We need to have that.
We were discussing before we began a system in which the People's Assembly would co-op or get into a consultative relationship with NCF for your dance program, Sports Council for your sports program, community development, that persons like this, we had originally proposed that these persons would sit ex officio on these assemblies, but since that seems not to be coming to fruition, that we're asking now that the People's Assemblies co-opt these persons. You could have, let's say, 5 officers at NCF, 5 officers at Sports Council, who sit or who go into consultation with a number of these people's assemblies across the country and advise them. Would something like that appeal to you?
Yeah, definitely, Ralph. Look, like I said, if we're going to deal with community development, then those young persons are an integral part of what should come from it. And if you're going to have persons from NCF co-opted into the process, then I am all for it. We need to, in addition to what I'm saying as it relates to that community training, the satellite training of persons, I do not want to have a situation anymore where we are training people and at the end of 8 weeks, 12 weeks, that we're handing them a certificate of participation. It makes no sense to me, Ralph. I think it should be a weighted certificate that, if need be, that there's an opportunity for them to have some kind of financial benefit from the training. We're talking CSME if they need to go overseas and then be attached to a coach until they graduate to be head coach. I think that we also need to have a situation where all of the training that is done in Barbados in communities, wherever, is no longer a certificate of participation. It makes good for writing notes at the back of it. We have to move away from that.
Thank you very much. Crystal?
I want to thank everyone for participating in this town hall. It was definitely very engaged, and the comments that were coming in, we do appreciate the input and the suggestions, and we will definitely ensure that they're included in the minutes and part of the discussion as to what we will come up with as our final product. And to the people of St. John, we're very grateful for you welcoming us into your community, and even though it's virtually, and for giving us your thoughts. And we hope that you have a very good night. I will let the other members of the panel give their final comments, and we will conclude for tonight.
Let me, on behalf of the committee, thank the members of St. John, and especially the Honorable Minister, Charles Griffith, for zooming in this afternoon. It's a very enlightening program. We hope that we serve the purpose that was intended, and we hope to see that when the time comes that St. John will come out and be fully represented. We want to encourage especially those young people who always feel that they are left out of such activities, to please come forward. As we all said, there's nothing written in stone. The number of 30 is not ready. It could be 10, it could be 15. It depends on what the final document brings about. So we are all ready and ready to go. We have 2 more meetings to come. One more, Crystal?
One more meeting.
In St. Joseph?
Yes.
And then
on the 30th of August at 5 p.m.
And then I was presenting here today at this meeting in St. John that they would like to have a national town hall meeting, and that we will try our best to put it together for them. So thanks very much to all those people in St. John, and especially the Honorable Minister Charles Griffith, a community practitioner like no other.
I too join Adrian in thanking Charles for coming in this evening. What is very, very significant is that Barbadians have heard a member of parliament and a minister of government say that he has no objection to people's assemblies being non-partisan, and I think that is significant. I want to congratulate Charles for being as open-minded and as broad-minded as that, and to having respect for the democratic principle that says that people must be able to choose those who represent them. And if you have a people's assembly, that people's assembly should not be chosen by a minister, but should be chosen by the people in the geographical area. I think I apologized to Charles earlier for giving him notice only today. He stayed with us for the entire time. Charles, I want to say personally to you, thanks very, very much. And we look forward to seeing you. Now, we're going to St. Joseph next week, and that is next door to you, so you can join us next week as well. Thank you very much, Crystal.
August 30th, sorry. It's on August 30th.
I beg your pardon. August 30th.
Yes. So that gives persons plenty of time to prepare for the very last one in St. Joseph, barring a national town hall. So, Ambassador, if you have anything to add.
I just say that it was a very productive meeting. I've been making my own notes, and I've noted such suggestions as the establishment of safe and secure study areas for young students, the establishment of a community health program involving both diet and exercise, a portion of the MTW budget to be reserved for community roads, and that to be accessed through requisitions from the People's Assembly, mentorship program, financial education programs, that the CARICOM Skills National Certification and that program be factored into the community development and education programs of the People's Assemblies, requisitions to have particular roads fixed, requisitions from the People's Assembly, alternate dispute resolution, and several other very important and impressive ideas. So I would say that this was an extremely valuable session, and even though we may not have had a lot of participants in terms of people making presentations, but the presentations that were made were really chock-a-block with very valuable ideas. So I want to thank everybody. Julian, Michelle Springer, Charles Griffith. St. John has done itself proud. Thank you very much.
And thank you. And I hope everyone has an amazing night.